Indigenous Rights Radio, because knowledge is power.
From November 10 to 21st, 2025, the UN Climate Change Conference, commonly referred to as COP30, is taking place in Belém, Brazil. The city, called the gateway to the Amazon rainforest, this major global meeting has gathered government representatives from 198 countries, alongside UN bodies, civil society, academia, private sector, and significant delegations of indigenous peoples, women, and youth. Notably, this year has the largest ever participation of indigenous peoples in the conference series, with over 3,000 indigenous delegates registered. Cultural survival is engaging with indigenous leaders and their representatives to understand their goals for COP30.
Hello, my name is Sara Olsvig. I'm the chair of the Inuit Circumpolar Council. The Inuit, the indigenous people of the Arctic, we are 180,000 individuals living across very vast areas from Galashiq Nunat, Greenland, Canada, Alaska, and Chukotka, Russia. We live in a frozen place. The Arctic is our homeland, and it has been so for millennia. And we are currently deeply affected by climate change, melting both the sea ice, making the sea ice not settle as it used to do, melting the permafrost, removing the foundation under which much of our infrastructure is built. We know from data that 50% of our infrastructure is at risk because of the melting of permafrost. We are losing our hunting grounds because the ice that settles in the winter is our hunting ground, is the hunting ground for our hunters and fishers. And therefore, the climate change and the changed weather patterns are directly affecting our people across all of Inuit Nunat, across all of our homelands in those four different nation states. This year, we saw a devastating typhoon in the western Alaskan coast, and 2 big communities have been relocated, 1,000 individuals, most of whom are Inuit, to the urban city centers because their hometowns have been flooded by the typhoon and currently cannot be returned to. So our people is deeply affected across our homelands by climate change, and we need urgent action to combat climate change first and foremost. A big concern for us is the lack of access for Arctic indigenous peoples to the climate finance mechanisms. Most of the mechanisms are set up so it's only indigenous peoples from so-called developing countries that can actually access this climate finance. And even them, they are very limited in their access. Only a few percentages of the big money that is put into climate finance is accessible directly to indigenous peoples. So over many years now, we've been fighting for the equitable and direct access for all indigenous peoples to climate finance. And especially for us in the Arctic, this is fundamental, that we can actually access the funds that are set up to remedy and redress and repair from climate change. This is directly about our human rights, and it's directly about our lived lives. We want our Arctic to be frozen. We need it to be frozen for us to be able to live as we have been for millennia. So we have many good goals here at the COP, and in the many years to come, we will still work on the climate finance, and we are hoping that other indigenous peoples from all over the world will continue to stand in solidarity. We need each other's support. We need to stand united to fight those inequities that we continuously face, also when the UN comes together and does climate finance mechanisms. First of all, the Paris Agreement, indigenous peoples and human rights have been put into text. Unfortunately, over the past years, we are seeing regression. We are seeing states backing out of supporting us. So we have a very important task ahead of us to ensure that those things we had already hard won, constituencies and equal participation of, for example, on the LCIP and the Facilitative Working Group are not ruined. We need to stand firm on our already, rights that have already been established and the status and role we have here at the UNFCCC and under the framework. So this is something that we will have to fight for, and we have to be able all stand together in that fight to combat those states who want to take a regression, who want to take steps back in regards to the support and promotion and protection of and respect for our human rights. And that's what it's all about when we talk about not losing that constituency we have here under the UNFCCC, or not conflating that constituency with non-Indigenous peoples. And we have to stand very firm on that to ensure that we can actually uphold our status rights and role here at the UNFCCC. So the COP30 has, of course, been dubbed the Indigenous Peoples COP. And I am also recognizing that I'm seeing a lot of Indigenous peoples here in Belém in Brazil. And I think that there's been some very good intentions behind making this COP an Indigenous Peoples COP. I am noticing that for the negotiations, we still do not have access. And we are also not seeing that the Indigenous peoples of Brazil have full access and equitable access to this space where the negotiations are taking place. So we still have work to do also at this COP to ensure that our access, our direct participation as the rights are enshrined in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples is upheld. And that also goes for the UN agencies and the UN frameworks under which we negotiate climate change. So I think we have to continue the fight for full and effective participation, for access to the negotiations, and especially also for states to avoid being tokenistic in the way that they call upon Indigenous peoples to be at the COPs. When we are here, our voices must be heard. We must be at the table, and we know that we contribute with solutions that are only helpful for the world and only helpful for all other peoples. So this is not about taking away what states are doing, but to making sure that the decisions are taken will not violate human rights and will not violate Indigenous peoples, and also to ensure that our solutions become part of the negotiations and the results of the negotiations. I do want to mention also that we are standing at a very critical moment in terms of what is called the transition from fossil fuel to so-called cleaner energies, and we are facing a big challenge on that, exactly because the deposits that are known of critical transition minerals, they are more than half of them are on or near Indigenous peoples' lands. So we need to do this right, and we are calling on all states to really think about, when you talk about justice and just transition, you have to ask justice for whom? And for Indigenous peoples, that is of course, the upholding the right of self-determination in terms of resource development or resource extraction. And it is also to end the land encroachment and land grabbing that we have seen for so many years as part of colonization. And today, Indigenous peoples around the world are really under pressure from so many sides, both from climate change itself, but also from the transition. And we need to do this right to really uphold the promise of a just transition. And I think that's one of the most important issues at this COP as well.
For more information on the rights of Indigenous peoples, visit cs.org and follow Cultural Survival on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Threads, and Blue Sky.